And welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be doing another review. This time it's going to be Five Nights at Freddy's. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check out other episodes on the podcast as well as other content on the channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And let's dive in. Lee, how are you doing this week?
Good, good. Feels like we're just blowing through this year, and like I said, got some interesting things we've been watching recently. Five Nights at Freddy's being one of the interesting ones, I guess. But other than that, it's been smooth. What about for you over there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I saw Napoleon not too long ago, just to get a feel for it, and well, I'm just gonna save my reservations for when we review it because I feel like there's a good way to make a Napoleon movie, a good one, i.e. Waterloo, and a not so good one, i.e. Ridley Scott's movie. So I think we'll reserve judgment for when we do that review. But other than that, it's been
Hmm.
a pretty slow week. Um, Now I remember when I asked you what movie do you want to review, you said Five Nights at Freddy's, and I was confused at first because I was like they made a lot of iterations of that game. Like, why do you want to review a video game? And then you came back and you said no, it's actually a movie, and I was like, oh, really? And to my surprise, it actually was, and it was released. When was it? August or when did it
Yeah,
come out?
late. Yeah, Q3 this year.
Yeah, I know it came out this year. Was it like before? I imagine it was before Halloween. So,
Yes, yes, it for sure was before then.
so, so Lee, since you recommended the movie, why don't you go ahead and just give us a full a full breakdown of what the movie was about, and then we can dive in about our thoughts and everything.
Yeah, sure. So, Five Nights at Freddy's. Obviously, um, people see it like FNAF, right? You'll see like acronyms for that, and uh, definitely well known for its video game. Which I think there's a whole lot of different ones out there. So depending on what you're playing, it could be a variety of things. But I think most people gravitate towards the kind of horror, jump scary. Five Nights at Freddy's video games. I think those are obviously the ones that people kind of gravitate towards. So this was a movie based upon that extremely loosely. And actually, we're going to talk about a little bit beforehand. This is not just the first movie, right? There was another one done years ago with Nicolas Cage in it. That was also a Five Nights at Freddy's. So um, something that very surprisingly has now two feature length movies. Maybe other ones I'm not aware of, but I definitely know there's at least two. So I guess we'll be talking about this one. So I guess the nitty gritty of the story is you have these um, animatronics, and we find out that the animatronics are pretty much deceased children. To give you a very uh, nice idea about the tone of this movie and how it's going to be. So you have these five children that are in these animatronics, and we follow someone named Mike, played by Josh Hutcherson. And Mike has kind of a traumatic past. He witnessed his younger brother being kidnapped, so he goes through and he has these dream sequences where he tries to find out information regarding what happened to his younger brother. And you can kind of see these two stories connect. It was kind of weird. I felt like there was almost two competing movies in this, where you have this kind of stuff with Mike and his backstory, and then you have everything with the Five Nights at Freddy's. And they kind of come together where he has a younger sister that's involved with it, and kind of everything that transpires at this I guess like Chuck E. Cheese equivalent restaurant, because that's definitely the vibes I get from it. So yeah, that's kind of the nuts and bolts to it, so to speak.
well, I mean, when I was watching that movie, because you said it felt like two different movies. I mean, for me, it almost seemed like the movie seemed to emphasize more on Mike and his relationship with Abby than him, working at Freddy's, which is like clearly a knockoff of Chuck E. Cheese. But so let me ask you this: what was your take on the whole story in general, like both the A and B story?
Um,
I know
honestly, it
I know
was
it's a
very
loaded question,
jarring.
so
It's very jarring to say the least, right? So you have like, if you have something, right? You have a movie called Five Nights at Freddy's. It's in the title, but I would say you probably spend 80% of the movie with this guy named Mike, right? It's
who's
very
not at
jarring,
Freddy's, by
to
the
say
way,
the
all the
least.
time.
Yes, yes, he loves to sleep, right? He takes sleeping pills and everything like that. It is very weird. It felt like they had some type of movie in mind where they have this, guy trying to cope and deal with a traumatic event that happened, and then they're like, "Well, we can't really do anything with this." And then someone's like, "Oh, well, wait a minute. Why don't we just set it something weird, and then we could just make it like that?" They're like, "Oh, why don't we just add Five Nights at Freddy's to it?" And then you just have this Frankenstein's monster of two conflicting ideas. And yeah, most of it does follow Mike. And, obviously, I don't want to totally overshadow the fact that he had a very tragic event happen where his, brother was kidnapped. And we don't really know what happened, and we don't find out, right? That was, I think that was kind of odd to me too, that we never really find out what happened to the brother. We presume that he got killed, but it wasn't really very clear. But you have him, and clearly he's struggling. I like how the movie kind of opens up, and Mike is, sees a young boy, and it looks like, there's an adult that's taking him against his will, right? And you find out that he ends up chasing after this guy and beats the shit out of him. And then you find out that, oh, it was just the boy's father. It wasn't a kidnapper. First of all, how did Mike not get thrown in jail? Right? That's like assault, right? Like, what was? Did you see that and be like, wait a minute, are we just gonna gloss over that? Because I felt like the movie glossed over that whole part.
I mean, I'm surprised he really, really got off that easy.
Yeah, right.
Because
I,
be-
I I
because
think
my
for most no,
because my impression of Mike is that he's completely unhinged. Because at first I thought he was taking like antipsychotic medication. I didn't know there were sleep meds.
yes, yep, and we wouldn't know, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it just felt like nothing happened. I'm like, holy crap, that guy just beat the shit out of somebody, and they're just like, whatever. We're gonna fire you from the job. Like that doesn't have anything else to do with what actually transpired. So, you have him, and he's reliving this event, right? And this event happened almost a decade ago at this stage. And like I said, I understand a character struggling with grief. At a certain stage, it's just like, is this really doing anything for you, right? Like, if you've been having the same dream, and I would say the same dream almost happens every night, right? Because I think we see him fall asleep I think at least three times, and it seems like every night he has the same dream. So, like, my whole thing is, if you've been doing this for near a decade, at what stage are you like, okay, I'm not really getting anywhere. This dream is not doing anything from me. So I don't know about you, but I felt like after a while he would have just gave up on it. But it was really jarring to see him still trying to do this dream and find out nothing.
I mean,
What do you think about his whole dreaming stuff?
I mean, I just thought the overall tone, they were just trying to be too serious. Because my impression was Five Nights at Freddy's. It's supposed to be horror, but there's supposed to be a bit of camp to a bit of fun.
Oh yeah,
Here, it's like, dude, you're just trying to make this way too serious than it needs to be. And I think the dream thing was just their excuse to try to, find a way to make it, very adult, very serious. I mean, what's ironic was that, the script was written by Scott Cawthorne, the guy who created Five Nights at Freddy's. So you'd think he would, understand the exact tone, but he just went to me at least, he kind of went in the opposite direction, just tried to make it as super serious as possible, kind of like Gone Girl vibes or something.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The tone to me was just so off because it is supposed to be. I mean, the story's about a bunch of animatronics coming to life and killing people. There's not too many ways that you take that premise seriously. But it felt like they just sat there and they just doubled down on the whole like tragic idea of it. So, as I said, I found that whole sequence very bizarre. I didn't really understand what they're ultimately going for. The other thing that was so distracting to me was you have Mike, right? And then you have his sister Abby. Now, do they seem like brother and sister to you?
I didn't know that because at first I thought he was like a single dad, and then you come to find out like she's his sister, and then you hear the whole backstory. I'm like, wait, so Mike is actually the stable one in the family? Like,
Yep.
are you shitting me? Like Mister, you know, taking all these pills that I don't know if they're sleep or antipsychotic meds. Mister Mike Schmidt, the guy who apparently goes around beating up people in malls. He's the stable guy. Okay, whatever you say, movie, I'll go with that because apparently you guys know better than us people in the audience. Um, I will say this: the fact that they had what was her name, Aunt Julie or something. She's the
Yeah, just the
she she
aunt.
she's the crazy aunt. Apparently, everybody hates her because she's a bitch, and then she tries to hire a bunch of goons to go and vandalize Freddy's. I mean, you'd think they make her a bit more sympathetic, but even when she's trying to sound like she's concerned, she still comes off as a bitch. You know what I mean?
No, it felt so fake, right? Like when
Yeah,
she was.
exactly. It felt so contrived because you're like, I'm like, are you serious? Like, you people cannot be. I mean, what town is this where everybody is so fucking one dimensional?
Yeah, she was absolutely like there was no question at all about it because and I think well we get through Mike that he the aunt wants the sister, right, Abby, so she could collect like a check and I'm like is that really the most effective way to have some extra income is to have another child around? I,
It's
I
not even it was not even that. It's the fact that apparently everybody in the family doesn't like her, but they never say why they don't like her. Like why? Like did she like do something, or did she say something, or did she not refuse to help with finding Garrett? Like, what's the reason? I mean, we're just supposed to accept the fact that oh, that's Aunt Julie. Yeah, she's a bitch. We all hate her, and then they just move on with it.
mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, there's no context to it whatsoever. I'm like, all right, again, movie. Apparently, you know what's. I mean, you know what makes a good story because a guy who takes pills and listens to nature sounds and falls asleep on the job is a much better guardian than I don't know a parent or an aunt who actually has a stable source of income and a stable place to live. But whatever, you know.
Yeah, it was very jarring whenever I saw her on the screen because she was very much a one-dimensional person and the reasons for what she was doing were just laugh like comically evil. It just was it got so distracting after a while. So yeah, so what I felt like they really should have done differently was I would have really liked to see more of Vanessa, the police officer. Like
Well,
to me
hold on.
that was
Hold on. Did you find it weird that she kept showing up at Freddy's every night and she was an
oh of
officer?
course.
And you're like, see, I don't know that much about law enforcement, but I'm pretty sure if you are in a blue, if you're in a black and blue, you're not just going to one spot every single fucking night, right? I mean,
Yeah. There was nothing. She had no
there's a
job.
reason. There's a reason why it's called the patrol car because you got to patrol not just that little restaurant, but I don't know the rest of the town. But again, movie. Apparently, you know things better than I do, so carry on.
Yeah, it was so weird because it's just like she shows up there, and I mean, we get as we move forward, we get why she's doing it. So initially, it is very odd, but we find out more about her past, and for her, to me, I would have enjoyed finding out more about her backstory. To me, that was the backstory we needed. I don't care about Mike, right? Mike is just some surrogate person that's our main character. He really doesn't have much of anything of a connection here. I guess he does loosely have some because we find out the villain was the one that, kidnapped his brother and everything. But, I think for the most part, what to me was most interesting was the Vanessa character, right? So she's someone that's showing up there. She obviously has a connection because we found out that her father, William Afton, who's played by the fantastic Matthew Lillard. So we find out that the father is the one that was doing the kidnapping and killing the kids. And she was, I don't want to say complicit because we don't actually get any of her backstory. Like, that would have been the backstory to have. Like, hey, this character, this very sympathetic character that we see, right? She was the daughter of a serial killer, a child serial killer, right? That to me should have been the focus of the story, right? That was the backstory we needed to get. I didn't need to continue to see Garrett getting kidnapped. I would have liked to see what her story was. What did she witness? What did she go through? Because her character was infinitely more interesting than anything that Mike was. So I really wanted to see more of her character. And I felt like, she just kind of divulged information. And, I guess she was, for lack of a better term, like brainwashed, like something obviously was there. Her father obviously had control over her, which I find very interesting that she's able to become a police officer, but she's hiding all these secrets about the fact that her father is a mass murderer, right? Killed at least 5 kids that we know of, right? Because we see 5 kids in the dream sequences. So very bizarre to me. The other thing I would have really liked to see was, why wasn't the younger brother, why was he not in those dream sequences, right? That to me would have been a ton more interesting. There would have been a ton more stakes. You have these 5 random kids. What if instead you see Mike's brother and he is a critical part in this? Like, to me, that would have been infinitely more interesting.
But what role
You'd
would
have
he?
a lot more engagement. There's a lot more involved with that.
But what role would he have played if he had been, one of the dead kids? Like, what could
So
he have done?
that's a great question, right? So he would be kind of like, maybe he would, if there was, one of the robots, maybe you find out like over time, like he doesn't remember his brother, but then he ends up being like a good robot that helps attack the other ones. So like maybe keeps the other ones busy while he's going after William Afton. So I think there's ways that he could have incorporated into the story that would have made it more interesting and more engaging, because otherwise we just have 5 kids, which I don't want to overshadow the fact we're talking very lightly about 5 dead children, but there's not as much stakes involved with it because we don't have really any personal attachment to any of the kids.
Well, I
I
mean,
think they could have done that in a way that would have had at least a little bit more connection with the rest of the story.
well, I mean, you can go a step further and say, well, maybe we didn't need Mike's story altogether. It could have been just Vanessa's.
Of course, yes, yes,
I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
agree. Because to your point, I mean, Mike's story really didn't add anything to it, because by the end of the movie, there's still no resolve, as to what happened to Garrett. He just finds out that William Afton took his brother, but obviously the brother's body isn't in any of those suits, so, or is he? But
You never know. And granted, I don't know if that's maybe an idea that they cut out, or like I said, they definitely set it up for a sequel, so maybe they were saving it for something else. But I think a big missed opportunity not to have Garrett be a part of the story. If you're gonna have all this Mike stuff in the background, then would have been nice to see a little bit more with Garrett, because we know that there's a connection between Mike and William Afton. So why not have Garrett actually be involved in the climax? But he just never shows up.
So this does lead me to the next point. So what did you think of William Afton? Because we only really see him in twice in the movie. One at the beginning where he's the career counselor, and the second time at the end where he's in that yellow bunny suit.
Yes,
I mean, did you think that was like perfect that we only see him twice, or do you think maybe they could have benefited from maybe like flashes of appearances every now and then, or what?
Yeah, I think they could have introduced a little bit more, but I think the screen time that he had was really good, right? And like you point out, there's very little screen time. I did really like on a second viewing. I don't think I caught this on my first viewing. I like when he first meets them in one of the only two encounters, right? Where you have William Afton, he's sitting there, going through, his information, and I like how he says Mike, and then before he says the last name, he kind of gives off this weird vibe, and you're not really sure why, but once you kind of figure out that, oh, wait a minute, he knows Mike's last name, and he puts together that that's Garrett's brother. And that's what ends up getting him invited to work at Five Nights at Freddy's. So I did like that. I think if you're watching the first time, you think, okay, maybe the guy's just weird or there's something else going on. But then, like I said, when you find out who it is and you rewatch that sequence, it's like, oh, that's pretty sneaky. He figured it out back then what was going on, and he knew what the connection was. So it kind of made that moment later on a little bit more powerful. And I think like the suit that he's in, I like kind of like the little like white lights that are like the pupils of it. I did like that, and I will say that I thought that the animatronics overall, I think that was I think they did really well with them. The one that I didn't like was the cupcake. The cupcake to me, a little bit too goofy, but I did like the other animatronics. But I think when we're talking about just the overall tone of the movie, we needed more of these killer animatronics. Like, that's what you want to go see when you're watching this movie. And it was so toned down. I think we didn't see the first kill from the animatronics until 40 minutes into the movie. Well, okay, I lied. We do see at the cold opening, we see I guess the original security guard gets killed, but we don't really see anything of them. Like I said, the big moment comes 40 minutes in where we get our first group of kills, and I'm like, dang, like we really spent a long time building this up just to kind of throw in a little bit of this information and just see a little bit of the animatronics. I think if you're going into this, like, you're not going for some deep thought-provoking movie, right? You're going there for, as he put it, you're going there for the camp. You're going there for the fun, right? You're going there for the jump scares. That's what the games are known for, is these crazy jump scares. And we really don't get any of that. So it's kind of shocking that the writer was the creator of this, because it felt like there's a huge disconnect between what fans of the game and what they're interested in, compared to what we got out of the movie, which I felt was just super, super bland. Maybe they're hoping that this is like another trilogy or something where they're trying to build up for something, but I felt like you definitely held a lot of things back in this first one that would have been a lot better. If you put in more of that stuff, because the animatronics I thought were super cool. I was totally down with them, but then they're barely on the screen. You have it just like the one sequence in the middle, and then at the very end where you actually kind of see them doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what's ironic is the fact that the animatronics really don't play that much of a role until like later on in the
No,
movie, where we see them, go berserk and kill the vandals, and then the second time when they go berserk and they try to kill Mike, and then they go after William Afton. But uh, but it's just one of those things where you kind of wonder, why there's such a huge disconnect in tone, because you would think that that tone from the video games would carry over into the movie, but it didn't. It felt like watching
yeah,
something completely different, like you mentioned earlier. Um, what's funny was that as I was watching those scenes between Abby and Mike having to deal with his issues. You remember when we reviewed that movie Thoughts Return, and we talked to Brady about that?
yes, hmm
I kept thinking, I'm like, this looks like a movie Brady would would make, with the whole family drama and everything. Not that we're making fun of you, Brady. We're just saying like the tone of like that that separate plot line kind of felt, it kind of had that vibe to it. You know what I mean? I really don't know how to describe it.
yeah. I
It,
mean, it had a very cool, dark theme to it. It just, like I said,
it was too
very much
psychological.
flashes.
That's the thing. That's what I want to say. Like, because the way I was looking at it, I was like, well, they're thinking to themselves, well, it could either go, lean heavy on psychological horror, or we can go with the camp slasher. They tried to balance it out, for a little bit, and then they finally said, "Well, fuck it, we're just gonna do psychological horror because we want to do something different." And I felt like it was a disservice, really, because
Oh, agreed.
because then it's not really Five Nights at Freddy's. Really, it's just the story of Mike and Abby and their shitty
Yeah.
aunt.
Yes.
So
The quote unquote brother and sister who absolutely look like they're 20 years apart. And I think in real life they are, because I think Dutch Hutcherson is 31 and the girl that plays Abby, I don't know her name, but she's 8. So do what you
again,
want with that,
yeah, again,
but super
there's just
distracting.
yeah, again, there are just so many instances where I was like, this clearly makes no sense. Because the entire time I kept thinking she's his daughter, and then he's like, yeah, she's my sister. I'm like, bullshit. She cannot be your sister, dude.
Yep. Like I
But
said, they didn't look that far apart in the dream sequences, but I swear, poor Mike, he aged like an absolute. Mike aged really quick, so I guess, like, unfortunately, all of the terrible his guilt over that aged him really fast because they look so far apart in age. It's utterly distracting. So,
it's the
um,
pills. It's one of those side effects. If you read the
oh
small,
yes,
it's a small. If you read the small print, it says may cause advanced aging. And you see how
yes,
many he's popping.
age like Benjamin Button. So,
Well, reverse Benjamin Button anyway.
oh, whatever, you know what I mean.
So another thing I wanted to ask you was was the I guess the setting of the movie, because this entire time I kept thinking, okay, all right, so you've got a Chuck E. Cheese environment, you've got arcade games, you've got pinball and everything. This must be set in the 80s, right? Because apparently, because a lot of the movies that they're doing now, they're trying to go for that Stranger Things vibe where everything's set in the 80s, everything's like has a dark and psychological tone to it. You're hearing songs from the 80s because they kept playing that song, talking in your sleep over and over again. And then you come to find out, oh, it actually isn't set in the 80s, but the vibe that they're going with, they're still continuing with that whole, let's drive these cars from 1983. Let's still use rotary phones. Let's all, play arcade games. What did you think about that? Did you find that distracting?
I honestly never really picked up on any of that. Honestly, I looked at, like, what we saw in there was obviously like a place lost to time. A place that was shut down because of the events that happened. So to me, that's I guess a piece of it is the fact that you have this place that's pretty much been abandoned since all this stuff happened. So that's the way I looked at it, was just a place lost to time, place that's been there for 15, 20 years, probably been closed down, or however long it is. And that's how I kind of looked at it. I didn't pick up really on anything that's specific about the 80s, or they were looking for that vibe. It just felt like, you're kind of in this very surreal environment at this, rundown Chuck E. Cheese type of establishment. And it's obviously showing its age compared to everything that it had. So they kind of
Well,
joked
I well, I don't
beginning.
I don't just mean Freddy's, because I mean like because I mean like the neighborhood shots. They look. I mean, obviously those houses look pretty old. The diner where they were meeting, where the aunt was meeting up with the Vandals, obviously that has a really really old look to it. So clearly, clearly the whole town itself could use a complete makeover, because it looked like it hadn't changed in you know 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, it's an old town. I mean, I used to live in a place that was, definitely a very, I guess we'll use the term historic, an area that had like a lot of old places that were still there, have been there for, decades, if not longer. So I guess I just looked at it like that. I'm used to seeing kind of stuff like that because I used to live in areas where, it wasn't outside the norm that, you'd see places like that just because it's just an old area. So that's I guess didn't strike a chord with me like it did for you.
So so just wrapping things up, what score would you give Five Nights at Freddy's?
That's a great question. So, because really, I feel like there's two different movie ideas in there. I think what I saw from the actual, um, the actual Five Nights at Freddy's establishment, the actual place, I thought it was really cool. I felt like There was parts that clearly played homage to the games, which I thought was really nice. I thought the animatronics were cool. And I thought, like I said, some of the deaths, while toned down, because to me, this would have been a perfect R-rated movie, right? Because I think that kind of adds to it, but they had to dial it down for it to be PG-13. But I liked all that stuff. The confusing part was everything else, like all the stuff not related to Five Nights at Freddy's in a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. So all the stuff with Mike, I just felt like was totally over the top. It was not really needed. I would have liked to see a lot more about Vanessa, her backstory, her connection with her father, William Afton, and everything that happened. And I would have liked to see more with Garrett. I would like to see there be some type of more of a conclusion, seeing him being more involved in the story. So I think if I was to look at it, I would give it 2.4 animatronic animals out of 5. Just to me, just you have to go all in when you have a very bizarre idea. And to me, they just pulled too many punches. I felt like they're just trying to be like, we're going to make this a quote unquote real movie. But then you throw in all these quirky elements and they just never really meshed.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I would give it a 2 animatronic animals, just because just because in my mind they were trying to make it so serious they forgot, they forgot that it was supposed to be a campy horror movie, you know. And and they don't even have the excuse of saying, oh, we had a different writer who was trying to do something different. They got the guy who created the series writing this.
Yeah.
So that's what I find so inexcusable, the fact that the guy who created the series, who and mind you, this is a franchise that's been going on for well over a decade now. I mean, he's built that franchise on the fact that it's like the survival horror with a little, element of camp in it. A- I mean, for him to do that is just such a huge. y- y- I mean, I don't even think confusion is the right word, because, when I watched it compared to the games, I'm like, these two are not the same thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing in here. I mean, sure, you'll put in the animatronics. I'm sure you'll put up the sign that says Freddy's, but but in terms of tone, in terms of story, I mean, there's really nothing about it that makes you say, yeah, that's just a film adaptation of this franchise. It's not like, I mean, it's not like with the Dungeons and Dragons movie that we reviewed earlier this year, where where some of the elements were a little bit different, but overall you still recognize it as a Dungeons and Dragons game, but on film. This, it's just, it's just completely different, and everything's kind of been, you know, turned on its head to the point where it's like, well, are we supposed to focus on Mike? Because it seems like you guys are going on about Mike's story and him trying to find out what's going on with Garrett. Oh, but also let's remember Mike is also trying to fix his relationship with his, with his little sister Abby, who apparently seems to have some sort of extrasensory perception that she translates into drawings that seem somewhat prophetic. But again, movie, apparently you know better than us, so we'll go with it. Not to mention the fact that you have comically one-dimensional characters, and the characters who are interesting, they're I mean, they're behaving in ways that are just so bizarre, even though they're intriguing. I mean, Vanessa, yeah, her backstory, could have used more fleshing out, but the way she goes about executing some of these things, it's like, are you really an officer, or are you just posing as one? Because a lot of the things that she does just makes you wonder, well, it's a bit jarring, because you remember that one scene where Abby gets injured, and Vanessa says, if you ever bring her back again, I'll shoot you. And I'm like, you're really laying it on pretty thick, aren't you, lady? Like, a few minutes ago, you wanted to build a pillow fort, and all of a sudden, you're threatening to shoot this guy if he brings his sister back to this place that is very dangerous, and yet you allowed this to happen. It's like, all right, well, again, movie, you know better than me. So it's just, so for me, like, it's just confusion, it's disappointment, it's the fact that there was so much potential that got wasted. And for me, the biggest disappointment of all was the fact that the writer was Scott Cawthorne. And I will say this to you, Scott: shame on you. You should have known better. You have a decade's worth of material to work with, and this is the best you can come up with. Like, no, I'm sorry. I cannot accept that. That's my score.
A little dramatic there, Luca, but okay.
I mean,
No, I totally agree. It's sad too because to me the opening was so enjoyable. It was just like, dang, if you just went off of that, I would have had a lot more fun.
because that set the tone of the movie, and I thought that's where the movie was going, and then it does a complete
Yes.
180. I'm like, okay, this is
Totally agreed.
this is bait and switch, basically.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it definitely felt weird that I felt like they really encapsulated what people are expecting in that first few minutes, and then it just kind of never quite gets to that high again.
Well, here's to you, Five Nights at Freddy's. We love the game, but the movie, not so much. Go ahead and let us know in the comments below what you think. If you thought Five Nights at Freddy's was the best thing ever, best movie of 2023, or a huge, stinking dog egg. And as always, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video and others like it with everybody that you know. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.
Do dogs lay eggs?